No, he's not there. It's just. Hello, Rabbi.
Hey, Lois.
Hi.
Hey, Estelle.
Hi, Estelle.
Good morning.
Good morning, David. Good morning, Estelle.
Could I make a nuisance of myself before we start?
Of course.
The Temkins are such nuisance.
Delicious.
The only reason
I call it delicious. Delicious. Okay.
It's a question. If it's going to take too long, then we'll abrogate it. And it only has to do because I'm dealing with the the concept of eighth lasos, and this arose.
Okay.
And the question is, we all know that in a time of pekuach nefesh, and the times of when there's danger to human life, all of the laws of the Torah are suspended. Why do the sages? Pardon me?
Almost all of them. Murder and idolatry and adultery are not, but almost all of them. Right?
Yeah.
And
okay. That's that essential, to the thing. Yeah. But the thing is, why did the sages strengthen and find additional justification for it? There is one opinion that it has to do, like with Shabbos. With Shabbos, that they say that the reason that you try to rescue somebody on Shabbos, even though that you're going to be breaking the things, but they don't say, oh, it's a matter of human life. They say, well, we have him because he can keep more Shabboses. And that the thing is, and that it's for the sake of Shabbos. Or some people, they say they look at it as an ace law. So why do they have to resort to these other justifications? Why isn't it sufficient to say life?
So Rav Noach Weinberg gave a series of lectures in Lakewood. And I don't know, it was probably around 40 years ago. He gave a series of lectures in Lakewood, and this is to the Lakewood guys, about issues connected to outreach and kiruv rechokim, etc. But he also discussed, difficult to answer questions that come up, and this was one of them. So he suggested that the fact that they don't say the actual permit is not eis lasos lashem, it's v'chai bahem. That the Torah itself says that ushmartem odas nafsho seichem. It says that you should guard your nefesh, which is understood to mean your life, and v'chai bahem, and it says v'chai bahem, and you shall live with them. So this is actually the source for the permit to transgress Shabbos if there's an actual threat to your life or to somebody's life, that you're allowed to set aside everything except for those, three. You're allowed to set them aside just to preserve life. So if that's the question, then why, like you said, why do I need this other explanation when it comes to Shabbos? So he suggested that the reason you need it is because it wouldn't, otherwise you would think that it wouldn't just be the three, you would think it would be four. And in other words, there would be not just three inviolate laws, but four. And that Shabbos would have been another category which you cannot violate even to save another life. That there has to be a separate rationale for Shabbos, and the separate rationale for Shabbos is that it actually serves Shabbos to set it aside in the case of pikuach nefesh, because then this person will be able to keep other Shabbosos. Even that, first of all, I mean, he's oft quoted as giving this explanation. I don't know if there's an earlier source for this explanation or if it's just his own understanding. We could explore that, but even that, because the way it works out is, what if this person, what if the doctors have determined that this person is a goses, which is a halachic category of somebody who's in the end of life. And it's very possible, it's most, not just very possible, it's the estimation of all the experts that this person only has minutes to live. So even in a situation like that, they do allow for Chilul Shabbos. Now, it could be that once the permit, you could argue that once the permit's been given, and we're not experts on the end of life, so therefore they just didn't want to complicate it and make it subject to all sorts of further consideration. But it's, I mean, it's one of the, you would call it a lumdisha question. It's this is a kind of learned question that where the expectation would be that we'd find it in a kind of classical way, that this is not an extra legal approach, but it's actually Eis Lasos Hashem is a kind of like emergency measure, and you might call it extra legal. But this is within the sort of legal system, within the legal construct. This would even be the case, just like it is with other medical questions, that we set things aside. So that's his explanation for it. But again, he's modern, and it doesn't have halachic consequence, what the explanation is, because the rule is already well known and set down. Even, for instance, when it comes to bris milah, there's discussions in the Mishnah, the Gemara, about what you're allowed to do in the case of a bris milah to preserve the health of the child, even if it, but not just that, but even to do the bris milah itself. Now that they don't, the bris is a separate thing that they learn from the fact that it says that it has to be done on the 8th day. The way it says it, Yom HaShmini, they learn that you can do a bris even though it's going to violate Shabbos to do the bris, but then there's medical stuff that you're allowed to do in the aftermath. That is also discussed over there, that you're allowed to do, and in the Hilchos Shabbos, there's all sorts of discussion about what you're allowed to do. So it's well established that you are allowed to set aside Shabbos for pikuach nefesh. The question is, as you asked, and it is a learned question, and it came up in those Lakewood lectures, and that was his response, that otherwise you would have thought that Shabbos itself fit with those other three, and that there were really four.
And it's an imaginative response, but it's not fully satisfactory, and I can't describe exactly why, but it just doesn't seem to get at the meat of it. Why did the sages feel that? Okay, whatever.
There's I noticed this. This is a topic that came up in the business halacha conference each year, and I'm sure it'll come up every year, because there's a whole area of law that has to do with taking care of Gentiles, or flattering Gentiles, or things like that. They didn't fully discuss this issue on Shabbos, but part of what makes the Shabbos pikuach nefesh thing difficult is that you technically are not allowed to save a Gentile on Shabbos strictly. If you in practice we do, but that feature does work into his explanation. Why would you not be allowed to save the life of a Gentile on Shabbos? So again, the explanation that you're why. So again, he would say, why? The truth is, it's not clear why you're allowed to save a Jew who's in danger on Shabbos. I mean, it's clear, but it's not clear why. And so he suggested that the rationale that this person is going to keep another Shabbos, and it's for the sake of Shabbos, would help explain the distinction for why you're allowed to save a Jew and you're not allowed to save a Gentile, because saving a Gentile doesn't help Shabbos, and saving a Jew does help Shabbos. But then you could ask a follow-up question: what if it's a Jew who doesn't keep Shabbos? What if it's a Jew, etc.? And you have follow-up questions, but at least it speaks to that distinction, which is very troubling. In fact, I think that was the original question that was asked by the Lakewood guys. Why should there be a difference between saving a Jew and a Gentile? And that's where he went into the explanation. And again, it speaks to it. I agree that it's not entirely fulfilling. Also, again, why is he the person to tell us about this? That you would think that this is something that should have been well discussed in the earlier literature, and maybe it is. The thing is, maybe it is, and I listened to those lectures 30 years ago or 30 something years ago, and I haven't listened to them since. So he may have cited sources that make this point earlier, but I just don't remember them.
Is he still on YouTube?
No, I heard them from cassette tapes.
Oh, okay.
But here, let's just look for a second. I'm just going to look. You're not going to see me look, but I'm going to look for a second. Here.
You have a blank screen.
I know, because I'm not sharing the screen. Rav Noach Weinberg, Lakewood. Yeah, they have it. You can download. Here, I just want to see. This 6-talk series was presented to the advanced students to the advanced rabbinical students of Lakewood Yeshiva, New Jersey. The sessions focused on a full array of issues raised by today's questioning youth. This is probably Rav Weinberg's most comprehensive explanation of the principles of Kiru, and is considered his most brilliant performance. All right,
Okay.
so I'm just gonna email it.
Please do.
I'll email it. Gonna do that right now. And again, I haven't, listened to it in decades, so you may find things that you want to further discuss after listening to these. Oh no, it's going to send it to me. But even that, the distinction between Eis Lasos Lashem and V'chai B'hem, even that seems to be a kind of learned area to sort of define the parameters of when you're considering one and when you're considering the other. And
Yes.
honestly, the parameters for Eis Lasos Lashem are just very foggy. I know there are places that talk about it, but it's just very foggy. For instance, the permit to write down the
Mishnah.
oral law. Yeah, that original permit is Eis Lasos Lashem.
Yeah, that's what they give us.
So,
Talmud office as the example, classic
right,
example.
but then somehow now the Rambam had said that you cannot permanently do this. You can do it.
No. Yeah, but this, I know.
Temporarily.
Because he has the toes and change, but according to some people, they actually take it not just as temporary. They take it as actually being
Apparently.
part of the corpus of law.
Apparently.
I know.
Right, but apparently, I mean, even how does he explain why he was allowed to write his codes? Maybe they gave the permit for the Mishnah, and apparently they continued that permit for the Gemara and the Midrash, but who's to say that it's permitted for him to do it? How does he know? He is writing what is essentially, he's doing what the Mishnah did, and his version of what the Mishnah and the Gemara did. And so where does he find permit to do that? And so how does it continue to this day? Is there no limit? Is there some sense that there will be a time when we no longer can write it down again? And it seems to be so broad. There's not any restrictions on it. It's just you can publish anything. You could publish something today that's your own discussion on it, and it seems to be without restriction. So how does that work according to the Rambam and according to many learn like the Rambam? But so that it just gives you this sense that it's a very foggy, blurry kind of permit. And also, again, let's say you have the decision by the conservative movement to allow driving on Shabbos. I don't know if they worded it that way in their permit, that it's Eis Lasos Lashem, but let's say they did. So what's the argument that they were doing the wrong thing? It seems like they were righteously motivated. I know this is not held this way, but I'm just asking as a learned question. It seems like they were righteously motivated to solve a problem that they genuinely believed could be the difference between huge swaths of the Jewish people remaining connected to the Jewish community. So, I mean, again, some people will say they just are not, we don't think they were qualified, but that's a whole different argument.
I know,
than
but
what you hear people making.
It's the exact same grounds that the Rambam explicitly uses in order that the faith shouldn't be lost. So
but it could be they never mentioned that as their motivation, but then that was a complete oversight because, but clearly this seems to fit that category. And even if you'll say, like, let's say you'll argue again, I'm only doing this for learned purposes. I'm not. I personally am practically unlearned in these subjects, but for our own learned purposes, even let's say you would argue that you're not qualified to make this decision. It was something that was supposed to be a decision by the Sanhedrin. We saw other places where that's not the case, and the Rambam says it. I couldn't find it explicitly, but I know he says this. It's been quoted, Moshe Shapiro, of blessed memory, quoted it, that the Rambam holds that a great person in a generation is allowed to make decisions like that.
Yep. I just read it this morning. He says it explicitly.
Yeah. So therefore, what are you going to say? So you're going to say, we don't consider you qualified. Fine. You don't consider us qualified. Bottom line is, at the time they made the decision, the vast majority of affiliated Jews in the United States were affiliated with the conservative movement, or ones who are even considering halacha, let's say, we'll call that. So they could argue that you may not consider us the ones to make the decision, but if we don't make the decision, then all of this is going to be lost. If you don't make this decision, fine. You're in charge of however many people you're in charge of. We're in charge of 20 times or 30 times as many people, I don't know, whatever, 10 times as many people as you are. And they're not going to listen to you. They're going to listen to us. And so we are in the position where we have to make this decision. If they had worded it like that, I don't know what you could say on the other side of it. That they are the people that have to make the decision. Maybe they could even argue, in a place where there is no man, be a man. In other words, when it comes to this population, you are not the man. They're not listening to you. They're not going to listen to you. So somebody has to step in. Now, after the fact, it might be argued that it was not effective. I don't know if it was or it wasn't, because I know, even for outreach, again, I am making this only for our discussion. This is actually being recorded, so I have to be careful. I am making this for our learned discussion. I am not a person to be engaged in this on the wider scene, and I'm not expecting anybody besides us to care what I have to say about it. But if you were involved in outreach, let's say in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, if you were involved in outreach, where was your constituency? Who are the people you're talking to that might actually decide to adopt an Orthodox lifestyle? If you're involved in outreach in any way, it is the conservative movement. And I've heard this said explicitly at outreach conventions, that the dwindling of the conservative movement has a next level effect on outreach, because that is the community that is the most likely consumer of outreach. The ones who are in the reform movement or are not affiliated at all are not the low-hanging fruit. And so the success, the numbers of people that were eventually attributed to Jewish outreach in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, at least, are directly benefiting from the fact that there exists this community. So so you could look back and you could say that ultimately the decision to allow driving didn't work, because the constituency for whom this decision was made is disappearing. The middle is disappearing. This is another thing you hear leadership talk about within the conservative movement, that the middle isn't holding, and it's a crisis. And there were several years where this was the focus of the national leadership of the conservative movement. So let's say that's true, and the middle didn't hold. The middle's not holding, and it's disappearing. So you could argue after the fact that that decision didn't work. It didn't save the people for whom it was directed to. But then let's say they answer back, we don't have to say that it held forever. We can say that it helped it hold for a decade, even if it, because is not decisions necessarily that hold up forever. You're making a decision for the moment. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? Somebody could argue. And let's say that this decision allowed for the community to continue to exist for another few years, possibly 10, 20, 30 years. Let's say they were able to make that argument. It still may have been a justified decision. Maybe somebody did have this conversation. I never heard it. But if somebody had worded it like that, I would find it very hard to, maybe you could find fault in the details, but as a general argument, it would be very persuasive. Based on what we know about Eis Lasos Hashem Eferuto Sefer. Even that thing, which many people in the Orthodox world immediately dismiss the decision because they weren't qualified to make this decision. They speak of themselves as some kind of Sanhedrin, the rabbinic, leadership of the conservative movement. And so, that's silly. So they just dismiss it. But if somebody from that community had responded, we may not be in charge of Lakewood. We may not be in charge of what goes on in Brooklyn, but you guys have no contact with millions of people that are part of that are associated with us. And so if you added, so we may not be your Sanhedrin, and we may not be your Gadol Hador, but there's a whole swath of people for whom we are.
Yeah, well, it was the same motivation. I mean, you could go two ways after the show. You had to preserve the remnant, and there were two ways: either by isolating yourself or expanding your borders. My previous rabbi, Rabbi Stern, he was very much in favor of actively proselytizing among Goyim in order to replace the numbers that we had lost. He campaigned very hard to become president of the rabbinical council there, but he was not successful. His dream was not shared. But right. I think I understand everything, and I understand your everything was said just between us and everything. Lois, right. Share. Rabbi Karsh permits driving on Shabbos. Do I have that right?
So Rabbi, what was his name? Who was the dean of JTS? Whose daughter became an important teacher. Also, he used to come around Chicago and teach. What was the name of the president? He was a very outspoken, very much public person.
Blythe?
No. He was the dean of JTS for many years. So he wrote an op-ed.
Yeah.
He wrote an op-ed. I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, where he said that, looking back, there was an effect of making this decision that they had not entertained the possibility of it, and that was that once you allowed driving, you lost the close community that continues to exist in the Orthodox world. Because people have to live together, there are all sorts of infrastructure and networks that had always been taken for granted within the Jewish community, because Jews just tended to live together, on the south side and on the west side. There was Jews of all stripes that were living together because Jews just tended to live together. But once, as things were changing, and especially with moving to the suburbs and with cars and stuff like that, so you now could have people living anywhere, and therefore we lost what was one of the very precious resources of Jewish life, which is community.
Yes.
And again, he didn't say I wouldn't have done it. He didn't say I wouldn't have done it, that we wouldn't have done it anyways, as far as I remember. That's also something that I haven't read since the one time I read it. But what is his name? I'm just going to do Dean's.
Berkowitz? No, not Berkowitz.
The minute I hear his name, I'm going to know. Wikipedia. Wikipedia.
Do you ever give money? Does Estelle give money to Wikipedia? Anybody give money to Wikipedia?
I did last year. I did do it last year. I did not do it this year, and I should, because I so benefit from it. All right, here we go. Here we go. Here. It's coming. It's coming. I'm getting there. I'm getting to that era.
They have a lot of people there, huh?
Yeah, a lot of famous people. Ismar Shorsh. Ismar Shorsh. So he was the one who wrote that thing. He was chancellor from 86, but apparently he had been around at that time.
This was at JTS.
Yeah. Sure. Second, I'm just gonna do, if I can find it in a minute, it's worth it. If not, it's not. Ismar Shorsh, letter, driving, Shabbat.
I can't do it. So.
Yeah, it's in the forward, 2003. Oh, he says it was, somebody calls it a mistake. The head of conservative Judaism's flagship institution is arguing that the movement made a mistake. Oh, he did say it made a mistake when it issued a landmark ruling a half-century ago permitting Jews to drive to synagogue. Rabbi Ismar Shorsh, chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary, made his declaration last week in Dallas during a speech at the biennial convention of the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism. By sanctioning travel on Shabbat, he said the conservative movement gave up on the desirability of living close to the synagogue and creating a Shabbos community. Shorsh's argument was rejected by several other movement leaders who argued that it failed to take into account the inevitability of Jewish flight to the suburbs and was insensitive to those living outside of Jewish enclaves in the Northeast, such as Upper West Side of Manhattan, etc. Critics include Rabbi Bradley Artson. Also, he actually said it was a mistake. Dean of University of Ziegler. Okay, so there were a lot of critics. That's a good sign. There's critics. The squabble is sure to strike some observers as an esoteric debate, especially since Shorsh is not urging rabbis to tell their congregants to stay home. But in many ways, the dispute reflects the difficulties facing conservative leaders as they struggle to find a formula, etc. and then that got brought up again, the whole thing about it. Okay, anyways, that's that.
It was
Um,
interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then again, if you do listen to the Reb Noach ones, I don't remember where it was. I feel like it wasn't that far into it when he talked about Shabbos, but I don't remember which one of the lecture, which one of them actually. But you could like forward through it or something till you get to the Shabbos question. All righty. I look forward to further discussions. I am not going to be able to meet on Monday. I'm coming back. I have a wedding from our community in Darchei Noam on Sunday, and I'm only coming back. It's in Baltimore, but I'm going to be coming back on Monday, so we won't be able to meet on Monday. But I look forward to meeting on Tuesday. All right. Be well.